This call is being recorded.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our conversation with Justin Kazmark, who's VP of Comms for Kickstarter, and he's calling in from Brooklyn on the last Friday in August 2018, and we're very grateful for his time and for everybody joining us. Justin, thank you for being with us, and we have some questions. But why don't we start with kind of your overview of how things are going over at Kickstarter?
Sure. Thanks, Sri. Thanks for having me. Quickly, I've been Kickstarter now 9 years. We launched in 2009. It's now 9.5. We're pushing 2019, April 28th, 2019 will be our 10-year anniversary. We're starting to think about how to reflect on what's happened over the last 10 years and what we're looking at the next 10. As head of comms, I've sort of seen over the years the trajectory of Kickstarter. People, first finding out about it in 2009 and trying to wrestle with what is this thing, and how can I use it? How can I help me? And then sort of in parallel to that, this idea of crowdfunding is sort of being emerging at the same time, concurrently, because Kickstarter is obviously one of the largest crowdfunding sites, but it never was something that we viewed. We kind of held that term at arm's length, and it still to this day is never in any of our copy. We don't really use it, even though it's, I think, synonymous in some ways. And the reason for that is it just sort of it's just two-syllable word, crowds and funding, that really focus on two things that are really about the mechanic. Our mission is what we are here for. Our mission is to help bring creative projects to life. And so we're very focused on creative projects, creative works we think are really important to a healthy society. And that's what our mission is. So, in the early years, there was maybe a time when we could have made a choice to be crowdfunding for anything. But we were very intentional about really honing in on this idea of what's in our mission to help bring creative projects to life. So that's what we're focused on. And there are now obviously other crowdfunding sites that allow you to fund for anything. But what you'll see on Kickstarter is this vast creative spectrum of projects, from film to theater to comics to technology, board games, video games, and that's what we're focused on. So
that itself is learning for me, Justin. I did not realize that, and you folks have become, as you said, synonymous with it, and so that's fascinating. Thank you, Justin. Just that piece of insight is really useful. Thank you.
Yeah. I usually try to lay that out there, because I think that from my vantage point as head of comms, I'm sort of tasked. A big part of telling the story of Kickstarter that I'm tasked with, and I don't know that we've done a great job articulating that broadly. And part of that's the story sort of can, as a platform, is easy to get away from you. And we're a very small platform. If you think about, I think we punch above our weight when it comes to other startups that you would recognize in culture. I think people definitely recognize the name Kickstarter, maybe alongside, say, Twitter or Facebook or Google. Maybe not that much, but I think it's definitely entered the public consciousness. And we're only 130 people, so we're very tiny, based in Brooklyn. We have some people in Vancouver now, and a handful of people working remotely. But yeah, the comms team, we're very small, and a lot of the story of Kickstarter publicly is told through the projects themselves. And just quickly, one sort of note about that. I think people hear about Kickstarter often through through specific projects, and specific projects are often amplified through the media. And if you look at, we have a very transparent public stats page, and it will sort of outline the various categories that you can launch projects from on Kickstarter. I sort of mentioned a bunch of those before: games, design, technology, film, music, fashion, publishing, food, art, comics, theater, photography, crafts, journalism, and dance. And so projects ranging across that very broad spectrum, and there's something like 140 subcategories within those top level categories. But the projects are often amplified to the media, and the media landscape doesn't really map well to the Kickstarter landscape. So that's to say that there are many more business reporters, technology reporters, over the last decade on staff at major outlets and publications. Then there are oftentimes, arts reporters, music reporters, and the arts and music reporters are often, on those beats, they're often critics in the business of reporting on things that are already in existence versus things that may or may not come to fruition through Kickstarter. And so I think a big part of the media story about Kickstarter has often revolved around a smaller fraction of the community on Kickstarter, entrepreneurial tech design projects, in part because there's many more people telling those stories, and in part because those projects often get more money and eye-popping sums of funding and backers, and I think that the news often bias towards things that are big or hyperbolic, and over the years you would have the next biggest funded project ever, or the next biggest funded one from Canada, from US, New York, whatever. And those projects tend to be the ones that are in certain categories. So games, design, technology, they tend to raise more money. But say film, music, publishing, we have more projects in those areas.
I could just pause there. For those of you who are following in the chat, which is, I'll have a transcript of this for later. I'm putting in some notes from our conversation, and I've also linked to the publicly available stats, as Justin mentioned, kickstarter.com/help/stats. And they're fascinating. I don't know if these are live in that sense, that maybe you have updated numbers, but I read this as $3 million total dollars. Of course, it's $3.8 billion total dollars pledged to Kickstarter, and 150,000 projects, right? So those are some stunning numbers here. 15 million total backers, 5 million repeat backers. So 1/3 of folks are repeat backers, 47 million total pledges. These are really eye-catching numbers, as you said here. But that distinction, you said games, tech, and business have the most publicity, but the biggest number of projects are in which three categories did you mention?
So that's right. So games, tech, and design are the categories that have raised the most money over the years, and the categories with the most launched projects, film, music, and publishing, and then the projects with the most successfully funded projects are music, film, and then actually games. So over the last couple of years, games has in particular been a bright spot on Kickstarter, and that's for a couple of reasons. Tabletop games in particular, if you think about tabletop versus video games as different communities to an extent, tabletop games has really taken off on Kickstarter. It's a place where independent game creators can sort of subvert other channels and traditional avenues of funding or distribution, and create on their own here at Kickstarter. The same with comics. I think comics has been another one of those categories where independent comic creators have really found a home on Kickstarter, and that's been another bright spot.
Well, this is very helpful. Thank you. Before we go to questions from our audience, we have some that we already laid out to you. You already told us about the landscape. Can we break it down by different categories? Especially, let's start with hardware and tech. Are there specific ideas, tips that you would give us for those of us who are doing hardware startups or projects?
Yeah, I guess there is, and there's I would say first and foremost there's just some certain base level things that thread through successfully funded projects regardless of category, and I think that one of those things is just sort of like a sense of I think what people appreciate is a sense of who the person is behind the project, why they're doing that, and then how you as a backer can help them bring that forward. What's the mission? What is the author? I think the sense of authorship is something that's sort of missing in society. That's sort of you see it in like green markets and other places, but But over the years, I think commercialization is sort of like you just interact with things that are in stores, shrink wrapped on shelves, but but they're often, what's missing is the author behind that. And I think that there is a sense of disenchantment maybe with that overall. And to some extent, Kickstarter's played a role in helping that be resurfaced. And like a local green market, you can go and meet the maker, the creator, the butcher, whatever. On Kickstarter, oftentimes the video that you click on when you first get to a Kickstarter project page will be somebody standing in front of the camera saying who they are, what they're trying to do, and how you can be part of that. And I think that's more than marketing. It's a real thing. And so I would suggest taking a look at some of the successfully funded projects and getting a sense, regardless of category, on how they do that. And then in terms of tech and specifically, I think that over the years, the one of the storylines that we've sort of combated over the years is the idea of vaporware on Kickstarter. And there in the early years there was a 2009, 2010, 2011. Kickstarter was just a new startup, and as a new thing, the news had a bias towards what's new, and we were sort of maybe a darling among other tech startups, and tech startups in general were having a moment in the press. And so a lot of the stories were very positive, and then maybe a few years in, the product starts to show some of the, what's possible on Kickstarter. And what's possible is, yes, you get 150,000 successfully funded projects that go on to win Grammys, win Oscars, 10% of films at Sundance on Kickstarter every year. But you also get projects that get the funding and don't come to life. So Kickstarter is a microcosm of just the world, and that's true on and off Kickstarter. There are many, albums or films that are greenlighted, or books that get funding, or with publishers, or entrepreneurs that get funding at VCs. That the thing just doesn't come to life, or it flops or fails, and that's not you're not immune from that on Kickstarter either. But I think that when that storyline came through, and you start to see projects that get the funding but are unable to fulfill, that I think that sort of like decompress the bubble of optimism around the platform to an extent. And I think that in relation to that, I think it's important to really give people a really transparent view of where you are in the process of the production. Is it just an idea? Are you minutes from distribution? Where are you? And be just very upfront. And it's okay to be very early, but you just have to, the more you can make that apparent and open up to the backers and the community about that, the more I think you're going to earn trust later on. And don't try to put a shiny coat on it. You really want to be very upfront and honest. And I think that will go a long way.
Oh, that's very, very helpful. Thank you. Let's see the other questions that we had told you we'd ask, and we'll have more as well. What are some new features on Kickstarter that we should know about?
We're just, for the first time in years, it's been years since we gave a reboot to our build, and this is one of the core experiences of Kickstarter that's kind of behind the scenes that you don't see unless you're a creator. So the marketplace of Kickstarter, like I said, 150,000 successfully funded projects, and as you mentioned, 15 million backers. So the backers pledging money to projects are it's a much bigger part of the community. But the smaller fraction of creators who are creating projects, they're going through the build process. And when you start a project, we just went through a year-long process to make that a little bit more polished, clear, give more guidance. And we're going to continue to think more about that. How can we help creators think through telling their own story better? Because storytelling is such a key part of a Kickstarter project. So that's something that you might not see that we've upgraded recently, and we're going to continue to upgrade. And then the other thing that we launched maybe a year and a half ago that we're really proud of is something called the Creative Independent. The creativeindependent.com is where you'll find that, and it's an independent resource that we publish for free for creators of all stripes. So you can come to creativeindependent.com, and every weekday there'll be another interview, typically with an independent creator from various disciplines. And in those interviews, we're talking to the creators about their creative process. And so we'll talk to David Byrne or Bjork or filmmakers or choreographers or technologists or game developers about how they create and the struggles that they face and the anxiety they face and the challenges they're up against and how they get through those things by themselves or with others, versus talking to Bjork about her latest album. There's a lot of places in the media that will cover the news of projects, but there's very few places that will hone in on process and behind the scenes of what goes through a creator's mind or the challenges they face. And we think that that kind of content is very evergreen, so it's just as useful 10 years from now, whereas like a review of an album might be no longer useful 10 days from now. And we think it's also very helpful for creators to hear that and be able to uncover the creators that they admire, what are the things they're going through, and how can they glean some courage and some insight through that. So the Creative Independent is something we've been working on for a couple of years. We hired a editor from Pitchfork. He's got a small team of 4 people, and every day they're producing interviews and also guides to specific types of creative work. And we're trying to bring that into Kickstarter itself. And so you'll start to see that content emerge in maybe on the homepage, newsletters, but also potentially Build itself.
I'm just checking it out, thecreativeindependent.com. Everyone should take a look. It's I like the very retro feel. It feels like it's 1998. Very simple design and serif fonts everywhere. So I guess that's all part of the idea. And then if I hadn't seen the Kickstarter name at the bottom, I wouldn't have known this was part of it. So thank you for sharing that. I think that'll be very helpful. Folks, we've got a chat room going on where you can post some comments. And I see Mo has asked a question. What are the criteria for becoming a featured project or a new and noteworthy project? And what's the difference and what are what are those 2 categories, and are there any others as well?
Sure. So yeah, on the homepage you'll see one to the left, featured project, and one to the right, new and noteworthy. And then you have underneath that other modules, recommended for you. And these are just sort of like our curated what we want people to see when they come to Kickstarter and experience Kickstarter on any given day. And any given day, there's something like 3,500 live projects, 4,000 live projects anywhere in there. And so a small subset of those projects, we have a team that is looking at them and trying to surface great examples of the platform, projects that are really, really thoughtfully put together, good imagery, a good story, great rewards, thoughtful rewards, that kind of thing. And of all the categories that we have, we try to surface projects in each of those categories that meet certain criteria, and then we have algorithms that will recommend those projects in recommended for you. So the recommended for you is largely, it's like some subset of projects that we've curated, but plus if you've used Kickstarter in the past, we might know that you've backed projects for New Orleans, and so maybe we'll surface New Orleans live projects for you, or you've typically only backed tabletop game projects, so maybe we'll show you tabletop game projects, or and then new and noteworthy and featured project. Featured project is something that someone on our team is hand selecting, and for that, yeah, it's like it's one thing would be great visual. So if it's going to be on the homepage, we want it to be at least thoughtfully the thoughtful imagery, elegant. It doesn't need to be like super professional, but something that doesn't look bad, I guess. And then and new and noteworthy, yeah, these are projects that are coming to us from all different angles, and we're looking at them from a perspective of what is the thing itself? Is this something that has been done before? Is it totally new? Is it new? Is it tied to a news cycle, for instance, or is it a notable creator? Is it just fun and whimsical? There's a lot of different things that go into the curation of the new noteworthy that would make us sort of tag it, and it would surface in this. But yeah, I guess the best advice I would have is to look at them and go deep in the feed and see for yourself, what seems to pop out for you. Can you see any themes? And I think you'll start to see, some of the things I mentioned.
Thank you. I just, by the way, went in and looked at my own history of back projects, and I didn't realize I'd done 23 of them. 5 not successful, but others very successful. And my favorite item on there is something called a stand. It's a portable standing desk that my family is very familiar with because it's always cluttered at the house. But the range of things, and a wallet I carry every day called a slim wallet. I forget what it's called. The Slim Fold wallet. So all kinds of things are on there. A soccer documentary, a museum exhibit, Malibu Beach. I can't even remember why I did some of these. So some of these are clearly my friends twisted my arms or something like that. Tell me about that. What is the mold of what's the personality of a backer, and what are some successful ways to get people to back our projects by using some of those techniques?
Yeah, so the backers are they're coming to Kickstarter for all different reasons. When we think of Kickstarter, we think of it. There's like basically 3 types of value exchange in culture that sort of emerged in the historical record at different times. You have, at some point, commerce, probably the oldest, came on the scene thousands of years ago, and then maybe philanthropy and investment. And each of these things are very different types of value exchange, where you're giving money to someone, and in exchange you get something in return, or a feeling of altruism, of a company, or you get equity stake. But they are different. And when Kickstarter first emerged, you start to see reporters report on Kickstarter, and they're sort of interchangeably in the same article using words like donate and buy, which are they're just inconsistent with unless you're with any one of those experiences. So Kickstarter has its own set of expectations that come with it, and in the early years we try to really help people better understand this. We think of it as something new. It's the 4th kind of way of value exchange that sort of shares attributes of each of these types of value exchange that already exist. And it's sort of incumbent upon us to help people better understand what exactly is happening when you're backing a Kickstarter project. But backers, you're not real. It's not investment, although it can feel like investment. You never get an equity stake for a project, and it's not quite philanthropy, because you often do get a copy of the thing itself, though you don't have to pledge for a copy of the thing itself. And it's not quite commerce, because sometimes the thing itself doesn't come to life, and you're not really buying it, so that you're helping the creator, move it forward towards its next step, and hopefully that step is existence. But you might pledge money to a documentary filmmaker, and then halfway through, they might run out of money, or the subject of the film might die, and the film is no longer useful, and or you run into hurdles, and you just are unable to bring it to life. And we did a study with the University of Pennsylvania a few years ago, and found out that it's 9% of the time that projects fail to deliver what they said to deliver. So that's the failure rate, and we want people to understand that and be ready for that possibility, even though 91% of the time the project will come to fruition and you will get the thing you pledged for. But it's not quite commerce, it's not investment, and it's not really philanthropy. It's Kickstarter. It's a new kind of value exchange. And so backers, when you ask the question, what are backers coming here for? Many backers are coming here for the thing itself. They see an item that they think is really cool. Maybe they themselves see themselves as early adopters. They like the idea of being an early adopter, and they're really here to see what's next. Or maybe they know the person, they know the filmmaker or the author, and they want to support them and help becoming a creator. A lot of backers don't pledge for any more than $1. I think I've backed more than 1,000 projects, and I'm a different I guess, bird in this world, but I often pledge for $1. I like to see, I like to be part of it. I like to say I backed it. I like to get the updates along the way and hear the story and see the process. There's a lot of people that do that themselves. They like to just sort of like to be part of it and say, I gave $1. I'm gonna get a Twitter shout out, and I'm gonna see the updates along the way and say, yes, I saw you way back when. But backers are coming for all different kinds of reasons, and I think that it's kind of important to sort of understand that so that you can create rewards that are available to each of those use cases. You might want to have a reward that somebody that doesn't want the thing that you're creating, maybe you want to create an opportunity for them to be able to at least signal that they're supporting you at a lower price point, or maybe they want a higher price point. They want to be able to support you, but they want to have like a behind the scenes dinner with you next time you're in town or something like that. So there's all different kinds of ways to reward your backers, and I think getting a sense of like what other people have done on that front will help you better sort of craft your own.
I have one question before we open it up to the audience here. Just to confirm, by the way, failure rate is 11% according to the UPenn study. Is that correct?
9%.
9%.
Well,
9.
yeah. So exactly. Because I can send you a link, but basically, overall 9%. But he looked at different categories, different size projects. Projects that raise like less than $1,000 tend to have a little bit of a higher rate. Projects with larger amounts of money tend to have a little bit lower rate. But overall, it's 9%.
Okay, that's great. So my last question to you for now is, can you tell us about the competitive landscape? There are so many people who are the Kickstarter of something else, and things like Seed Invest, which are good for startups. How do you compete with those? Do you compete with those? Do you care?
Yeah, we don't. It's not something we talk about a lot. Competition isn't something that comes up in the office so much. Our mission again is to help bring creative projects to life, and it's not to help bring creative projects to life only on Kickstarter. So there are other places that are helping bring creative projects to life. We think that's a good thing for society. Ultimately, we want more creative projects to come to life because I think it leads to a healthier, more vibrant society. And so we don't need to be the only place where they come to life. We want to be a great place where people have great experiences, and we can maybe offer more or as much as we can and be the best version of ourselves. But it's we're not a company that's sort of trying to maximize profit or focus on beating competition. We just approach it from a very different perspective, and our approach is more about how can we serve the mission that we're here for, and not be all things to all people, or to box others out for no other reason than to like capture market share. It's really about how can we do what we're here to do best.
And that's because you have a different kind of ownership structure, or?
Yeah, well, I think
it's
ultimately because that's I think that's what the founders, their philosophy, and Perry Chen, our CEO and founder, that's something that he put forth. And years later, we did reincorporate as a public benefit corporation. And so, when we launched in 2009, around the same time, a company called B Labs in Philadelphia emerged, trying to create this new kind of corporate structure called public benefit corporations that have sort of taken off, and around the same time we started taking off. And this means that companies can now become, instead of a C corporation or S corporation or LLC, they can incorporate as a public benefit corporation, and this allows them to escape this doctrine of shareholder primacy that afflicts a lot of society. So you have instances where companies, they might have a mission to do X, but if doing Y would make more money, then the shareholders might be able to have a case to bring them to court and suggest they need to pivot or pursue Y in the interest of maximizing shareholder profit. Before public benefit corporation emerged, there was no really quite legal protection for escaping the idea of maximizing shareholder profit. And if you were incorporated as a public benefit corporation, you can balance profit with purpose, and you can put stakeholders alongside shareholders, so we can consider in the business decisions that we make, our employees, our neighborhood, the environment, other stakeholders, and make decisions from a place of that versus from a place of, does this maximize shareholder profit? Is this something that is doing that? And so yeah, we're a public benefit corporation, and that's something that allows us to have that approach.
There's a terrific New York Times article when this happened in 2015, Mike Isaac's story about it. I'll link to it here. Folks, let's open this up to questions. Justin, hope you can stay for a few minutes.
Sure.
Just unmute, and then I'll know you have a question, and then I'll come to you if you would like to ask something. Otherwise, I have other questions. Mo, over to you.
Hey, Justin, I just had a question about setting a goal for campaigns. Now, sometimes there are often a different public goal versus a kind of a internal goal for companies. And how do you recommend setting that public goal? Is lower better so you reach the goal faster, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, totally. So first and foremost, I would say, if people use Kickstarter for various reasons. Kickstarter, if you're using Kickstarter because you want to mitigate risk and take and see if there's a market for something before you fully move forward with it. You really want to make sure the goal maps to the budget. So if there's a chance that you set the goal low, you only get $30,000, but the thing's not happening unless you get 180. The people that pledge $30,000 to you are going to be pretty upset, maybe, if you weren't open about that. When you get the $30,000 and then you're not able to get the remaining 150, and then and you're unable to produce what you said you wanted to produce. So the real answer is, make sure that if you're taking people's money, then that you have a plan to bring the thing to fruition. And ultimately, if that means mapping it to the actual budget, then that's a good idea. There are other times when it might be the case that you're complementing the funding you get on Kickstarter with other funding, and the thing is probably going to come to life with or without Kickstarter. And what you want to use Kickstarter for is really to maybe get that last bit of funding, or to generate excitement about the idea. It's a great way to catch people's attention. It's often a hub for innovation and pioneering work. And so if you're using it for that reason, I would just be very clear about that and say, look, we have 90% of the budget. This is really, we want the earliest adopters, you, to be to get a first look at X, or like the sneak peek at whatever. But I would just understand what you're using it for, and then from there, if you're trying to figure out can we get, the thing is, when you reach the goal, say the target's 100,000 and you reach 100,000, now you still have 2 weeks left in the campaign. Because you've reached the goal, there's not really, there's a little bit of the call to action is dampened because you've reached it. That's not to say that you can't continue to escalate interest in certain ways. But there is a phenomenon that happens when, if you're getting closer to the deadline and you haven't yet reached the goal, you often see people really rally behind you, and that is a strong call to action, because they're emotionally invested in the thing. They want to see it come to fruition. And if they've already backed on day one, week one, on week 4, if it's not, it's within reach, but a stretch, people will really rally behind it, and you can get maybe more support for it that way. So it is a tricky balance trying to figure out where you set the target. But ultimately, I think it's number one, will we be taking money and from someone and not be able to produce it if we don't get more? And if that's if you've done the calculus there, then it's I guess I would look to other analog projects. I would think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish, how much resources you have to really get the word out about the project on the say it's a 30-day campaign. Do you have staff that's going to be able to really push it in different ways and share it with different audiences, and that should be part of the conversation too.
It's very helpful. Let's see. Anyone else have a question? Just unmute yourself and then I'll call on you if you have a question. Mo, if you want to follow up, you're welcome to as well. Justin, while we're waiting, any suggestions for people who are running nonprofits? How can they do this if there's not an actual new project? Should they come up with a project for this? Is it how have you seen like some of the big 501c3s use you?
Yeah, we had a rule like Kickstarter can't be used for charity for a long time, and we realized that the word charity in the UK in British English means nonprofit, but we absolutely do allow nonprofits to use Kickstarter. It's just that they have to use it for a creative project. You can't use Kickstarter to fund like operating expenses for Q2. You have to have a very specific creative project. You have a film, a theatrical production, a zine, a podcast, some journalism. What is the thing that you want to create that's going to advance the mission of the nonprofit? And how can Kickstarter help you bring that thing to life? So some of the nonprofits we see in museums, bring together exhibits and that kind of thing. That's a popular one. We've seen them get funding for specific creative campaigns or theater. But ultimately it's not much different whether it's an individual, an entrepreneur, a band, a nonprofit. As the creator, I think some of the same principles apply, for success across that strata. And then it's really more about what is the project ultimately trying to accomplish, and how can the backer help you get it come to life.
So, for example, Pooja is listening, who's with Pratham. It's a nonprofit here in the U.S. Right? If I'm making this up, but they want to create a documentary about kids in India, whatever. They can just, in theory, do a Kickstarter for that project, but not for the expenses. Correct? Not expenses for that, but not general operating expenses.
Yeah. Not general expenses, but certainly that makes it. We've seen that before. Certainly. Nonprofits that documentary film is a great way to bring an idea to light in a creative way, an idea that is tethered deeply to the mission of the nonprofit. One of the things that we're here for, bringing creative projects to life, is also to fight against this idea of monoculture and mass commercialization of things that sort of creep up on culture, and it really is like sort of experiencing the same thing. And we think that a more vibrant culture would be beneficial. So you could imagine Kickstarter funding like a documentary about the plight of monoculture or something like that. But yeah, nonprofits can bring the issue that they're focused on advocating for or fighting against to light through a creative project like a documentary, and that makes a lot of sense.
Great. Mo, you had another question?
Yeah, I was actually on this topic of nonprofits. Our project, we were thinking of supporting a nonprofit as part of our campaign, but I know that Kickstarter's rules don't allow any of the funds raised to go towards anything other than funding your project. Are there other ways you would recommend that we can somehow support a nonprofit that's maybe at arm's length from the raising of funds within Kickstarter?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. We've definitely seen this before. I would have to ask. I can get back to it and ask a colleague of mine. There might be somebody on staff that has worked on this particular problem more specifically than I have. But you're right that we don't. If you're raising $100,000, we don't want to see the money go towards the charity just on the side. We want to see the money go towards the budget of the creative work itself. And if you're maybe, I'm not really sure how to sidestep that. But maybe there's a way to sort of you're working directly with the nonprofit, their co-creator or something, and maybe some of the funds go towards the staff they have. Because I assume if they're part of the project, maybe they are they're investing time in bringing the work to life, whether it's marketing it or advising on it or something. So they're doing something. If they're doing something to support the project, you could think of them as not an expense, but as something that you're you're helping, they're helping you and you're helping them.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Mo, another question?
I know. I just wanted to say thanks for the answer.
Okay, good. Folks, we just have a couple of minutes left with Justin today. If you have a question, please let us know. I'll give you a second here to think of something if you'd like to ask. Otherwise, from me, and we'll give people a chance to think of another question. In terms of innovative techniques, is there anything that jumped out at you when someone asks you what's like a really cool way of using Kickstarter that you're proud of, that you've seen something or something newish that people have done?
Me? Yeah. The things that kind of excite me are the projects that would not be able to get funded any other way, really. There's I think that the typical traditional avenues of financing, funding things in the world, they are often driven by, will this thing generate revenue and produce a return on my investment? And when you have a system, a society that sort of systemically invests in things that will make a return on investment, it produces a certain kind of culture. And so the kinds of things that get the money in the first place maybe often will resemble each other, or maybe like it's this summer is movies about superheroes because we know that the box office, they're going to do all the box office or something like that. So, with Kickstarter, people are pledging not because of investment, because you can't get a return on your investment on Kickstarter. And what we see is people pledging for all different kinds of reasons, and sometimes that's leading to a more colorful, imaginative universe of ideas coming into existence. And so I love seeing projects that are just, you just can't see this thing happening anywhere else. You're not going to see a venture capitalist get behind this, or a film studio get behind this, or a record label get behind this. But it makes perfect sense on Kickstarter, and there's still, maybe a niche market for it, or enough people in the world that say this thing should exist. And I think that's leading to a more vibrant culture.
Terrific. This is so helpful. Riaz, you have a question? Let me just unmute Riaz here. Sorry, Riaz, go ahead. You're on.
Yeah. Hi, Justin. I had a question about marketing campaigns to support a Kickstarter campaign. So we're running a Facebook campaign to support Wi-Fi Monitor. And I just wanted to know if you had any considerations or thoughts about how to best approach the actual launch of the Kickstarter campaign, and how you support that with any type of marketing initiatives.
That's not something I'm like super familiar with, to be honest. I mean, I think I would just say, like, yeah, the Kickstarter itself can often be a lightning rod for interest, and I think that if the campaign is well produced, and the video that you've produced there's a compelling thing that the product itself is compelling, and the pitch around it is really compelling. Often that alone is enough to drive interest, and people will share it, organically through Facebook, or the press will organically discover it. On top of that, if you're thinking about a specific marketing campaign, that's not really my area of expertise, but I might be able to point you to someone else on staff or something like that has had experience with that. But I do know there are other campaigns that have done it, and I think there have been some notable postmortems written about online that I could try to dig up.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you. And last question here: how important are pledge gifts to a campaign? Are they absolute must, or are they optional? Thoughts on that?
How important are pledge gifts?
Yes.
You mean rewards, like the things?
Correct. The rewards.
Yeah. Yeah. So the most common pledge is $25, and at that price point, I'm guessing it's often you're getting something in return for $25, and the average pledge is $75. But there is there is a strong contingent of people that I think more than 1 million who pledge for at this point $1 only, which often, the thing you're getting is probably maybe digital thanks or if anything, just being part of it. So there are, and then there's probably more than $200 million pledged for no reward at all. And so there are people that will pledge to Kickstarter projects and don't select a reward. But I think that the reward is crucial to the project. So you actually have to launch with a reward. But what that reward is up to you. So it could just be like, hey, I'm going to run to the top of a mountain and say your name. We've seen that reward before, but typically it's something that is tied to the thing itself. So a digital download of the film, or digital download of the song, or a comic book, that kind of thing. I think that's the sweet spot, I think, for the most part, but it's not necessary.
Okay, and before we let you go, Justin, we didn't hear your story. Would you mind just quickly telling us your own story? How long? I know you've been there. You told us how long you were there, but just how did you end up here and your background?
Sure. Yeah, I went to school here in New York City, and I had an internship at this place called Nasty Little Man, which is like a PR firm for Radiohead and the Beastie Boys, and I didn't really know what PR was, but I was studying semiotics, which is not really something you can get a degree. You can get a degree in it, but you can't really go to work as a semiotician. So the only thing saleable on my resume after college was in PR at Nasty Little Man, and I got a job at a local firm here, and it no longer exists. But after a year doing that, I realized I didn't really want to be in PR, and I became a New York City public school teacher, and I spent 2 years teaching sixth grade math in East Harlem and the Lower East Side. And then and from there, I actually, while I was doing that, I was still brainstorming. I was retained by the same PR firm I left. They would have me come back on Wednesdays for brainstorming sessions, and I sort of kept one foot in the door there. And when I was done with my 2 years teaching, I decided to go back, so long as they would put me on their nonprofit clients, and so I did that, and they started getting more and more tech clients. This is I guess when the second tech boom in the city was happening in the early 2000s, and so I'm sort of straddling the world of nonprofit and tech. And in 2009, I decided to leave and start my own consultancy, focused on that. So focused on social enterprises in the tech space, doing communication strategy work for them. And that's when I met Kickstarter right before they launched. I met Perry, and he was telling me about this thing he was about to launch, and it reminded me of Donors Choose a little bit, because when I was a teacher, I used Donors Choose to fund a Scrabble club and a chess club, and they became one of my first clients, and I did that for about a year, and I left New York City for about a year right after that, when they were really starting to get popular, because I had been planning this long hike. My girlfriend at the time, my wife now, and I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, which goes from Mexico to Canada, and we'd been planning that for years. So we decided, let's up and leave New York City for a year, hike from Mexico to Canada, and we come back, we'll get back to work. And when I came back from that, Kickstarter had grown from 3 people to 10, and they really needed somebody. So I started my own thing again. They were one of my major clients, along with Etsy and Personal Democracy Forum and a number of other social enterprises in the tech space. And
Lots
then
yeah, good guys and gals.
and then I've just been resigned all my clients in 2011 and came in house, and I've sort of been with Kickstarter ever since. Leading comms now, and yeah, it's been a long ride.
That's amazing. And you said there are 150 people now, right?
Yeah, about 100. I think about 140ish, maybe with like another 20 job openings or something.
Oh, good. So maybe some people here will be interested in that, and it's so interesting to know that such a successful company has a public benefit underwriting all of its work. That's really good. Justin, you've been terrific. Thank you. I'm going to encourage everybody to follow you on JKaz at JKaz on Twitter. And thank you so much. Any last things that you can tell us, and anything you suggest people who want to continue to learn more apart from the Creative Independent? Is there specific, or do you do meetups? What does the organization itself do to reach people?
Yeah, I would say sign up for our newsletters. I'm not actually sure where we allow you to do that on the site anymore. I'm guessing it's in the footer. But yeah, sign up for our newsletters, and we often will tease news there, or events, or things that we're doing. And I think that's a great way to follow us and see what we're up to next.
Terrific. You've been absolutely wonderful. I want to thank you on behalf of my team and our clients. We're so grateful. Thanks very much, Justin.
Sri, thanks so much, and thanks to everybody else for asking questions and for being here. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Folks, I'm going to stick around for a couple of minutes. If anybody wants to chat about what you learned, or we've let Justin go, anybody have a comment, feel free to jump in and comment and share anything that you learned. And we can also do a follow-up with him as needed in the future. But anybody would like to say anything, you're welcome to do that right now.
Hey, Sri, I thought this was a really useful conversation to have, so thanks for organizing it.